Welcome back. Today our lesson's on sum and difference of cubes, how to factor them, and using factoring by grouping. So we're adding on to our arsenal of factoring methods. These are the problems that we're going to do. That's one from each section. Okay, so let's jump in with some notes on how to factor using the sum and difference of cubes. So if you're given a binomial and it's in this form a cubed plus b cubed, we'll talk about how to find that form in just a second. But before we start, we need to memorize these formulas. So I want to point out some key features, some patterns that makes it easier for us to memorize. Okay. Some teachers like to call this the SOAP pattern, and that's because if you notice, when we factor this on the side, this is the part you're going to be asked to remember. There's a lot going on in terms of the signs. That's just one thing. Okay, so first notice that the sign, if there's a positive sign how you start in the original equation, then you're going to start with the same sign. And then you'll go to the opposite sign. And then this will always be positive. Let's see the difference of cubes. So if it's the original question is a minus, then you're going to have the same sign first, then the opposite, and then you're always positive. And so this model of SOAP is going to be helpful when you're remembering your signs. It's same, these ones are the same, then these ones flip, they're opposite, and then the last one's always positive. Okay, so I hope that helps you remember the signs. Next, let's talk about the actual letters themselves. So once we figure out what our A is, and our B, we just write each of them here once, and then we'll square the first term, and in the end we'll square the last term, and our middle term is just multiplying them by themselves. So that's the same exact process here. You'll find your A and find your B. That's what I call that a pro tip. Pro tip. Find A and B first. Okay, once you found A and B, you just rewrite them in here. Then you square your A, multiply the two together, and then square your B. Here's what I want you to notice as you're looking at our formulas. There are no coefficients. So there is no 2 out in front here. This is just A's and B's. We're squaring them and multiplying them together. So let's practice that with this example. Okay. So pro tip says find A and B first. So this is how I'm going to do it. We're going to rewrite 8x cubed minus 1 as, well, this is clearly a difference. So we're going to rewrite this as a difference of cubes. We just need to figure out what cubed gives me 8x cubed, and we have to figure out what cubed gives me 1. Before we do that, let's write our formula. We've got to write our formula every time. So this is an A cubed minus B cubed problem. So A minus B, okay, we're staying the same. Now we're using the opposite sign. I'm using SOAP in my mind. We multiply them together, and then it's always positive, and square the last term. Okay, so come back to the question, what cubed, or what times itself 3 times will give me 8x cubed? And that's 2x. Okay, 2 times 2 times 2 gives me 8, and x times x times x gives me x cubed. Next, okay, what times itself 3 times, or what cubed gives me 1? The answer is just 1. So common sense then dictates, I want you to observe these 2 lines right here. Okay, common sense then dictates that our A value is 2x and our B value is 1. So now it's just a matter of plugging them into our formula. And we have a guide right here. We'll use that. So my A was 2x, then I need to minus my B, which is 1. Next, we're going to square our A term. So that means take 2x times 2x. That's 4x squared. Plus, okay, now I'm multiplying the two together. So 2x times 1 is 2x. And then we'll square the second term. So 1 squared, or 1 times 1, is just 1. And that is how we factor. So if it's helpful for you in my class, it'll be required. But basically, I want you to, first of all, identify A and B. And start with these blanks here. Then you're going to write out the entire formula to serve as a guide to make factoring super easy. Okay, let's do our first problem from the homework. All right, we're doing number 1F. And let's see if we can figure out what cubed gives us 2m squared and what cubed gives us 54. So if you think about it, there really aren't any numbers that if you multiply it by itself 3 times, gives me 2. So I'm already drawing a blank here, but let's see if we can't do something else instead. Since we're factoring, we want to use up all our factoring methods before when we're stuck. And right now, the one thing that I can do, since 2 is even and 54 is even, if I use greatest common factor, I can pull out a 2 from both terms, right? 2 is the biggest number that goes into both terms evenly. So I'm going to pull out a 2. I'll be left with m cubed plus 27. So that would be a huge tip. Always start here with GCF. Now that I've pulled out the 2, I'll examine my new binomial to factor. I have m cubed plus 27. Now this looks more doable because I can already tell when I put in my blanks that the thing that will be cubed to give me m cubed is just m. And then what cubed gives me 27? Well, that's 3. And now I've identified my a and my b. So let's go ahead and write out our formula. This one is going to be a sum of cubes. So let's use our SOAP model to remember our signs. Okay, we're going to start with a and then the same sign. Then a squared and opposite sign. Multiply the two together. Always positive. Square the last term. Okay, so as we did before, let's actually write a equals, well, a is going to equal m, and b is going to equal 3. So using this as our guide, we'll fill it all in. Okay, what's my a? M plus. My b is 3. Okay, I'm going to square a, that's m squared, minus. Okay, multiply them together. That's 3m, and then always positive. Now we're adding b squared. So b squared, well, 3 times 3 is 9. So that's pretty cool because we went ahead and we factored this guy. But if you said this was your final answer, you'd be missing something because this does not equal that. I forgot to keep my 2 out in front. So we're going to rewrite our final answer. If you use GCF, you must include that in the final answer. So my final answer is going to be 2, and then m plus 3, m squared minus 3m plus 9. Let me highlight that in blue. That's our final answer. All right. Let's do one more. So this one's, again, a sum of cubes. So we're going to see if it's already factorable. But first, let's see if we can pull out a GCF. Okay, let's check that first. So I have an 8, I have a 125. I can't think of any numbers that go evenly into both. So it doesn't look like GCF will work, but that's okay. Because if I try to turn it into a sum of cubes, I'm already thinking about what number times itself 3 times gives me 8. What cubed gives me 8? And I already know that's going to be 2. And what cubed gives me x cubed? And that's going to be x. So I already know it's working. Let's see what we can do with this guy, okay? what number times itself 3 times? What cubed gives me 125? That's going to be 5. And don't forget we have a variable as well, so we'll have to include the y. So just because we have lots of letters or variables and numbers here shouldn't throw us off. Okay, because 2x times 2x times 2x is going to give us our 8x cubed. So you can take it like I did, do the numbers first, and then do the variables after. Number first and then variable after. Just don't forget about putting both of them. Okay, so let's write out our formula. Try to do it yourself. Remember to use soap for your signs. Can you fill in my signs? It's going to be same, opposite, always positive. Perfecto. Okay, so common sense dictates that A is equal to our 2x, since that's what's being cubed, and B is equal to 5y. It's just a matter of plugging it in now. Okay, so A plus B times, okay, now A squared, that's 2x squared, or 2x times 2x, 4x squared, minus, okay, A times B. So we're multiplying these guys together. 2x times 5y gives me 10xy. And then plus b squared. 5y times 5y gives me 25y squared. Since we didn't pull out a GCF in the beginning, this is our final answer. We don't have to worry about rewriting it. We're good to go. Okay, so we're almost done. We have to learn one new thing now, factoring by grouping. So let's just do this problem, and as we go, I'll explain the process as you may have learned it in class. So factoring by grouping will usually have 4 terms. And to start, we're going to underline the first 2 terms, and we're going to underline the second 2 terms. Okay? But we need to make sure that these are in descending order, and they are. Okay, so now I want you to just focus on the first 2 terms. So it's almost like pretend you don't see the minus 9x minus 18 at all. Pretend it's not there. Just look here. So here's the question you can ask yourself. We're basically using GCF on the first 2 terms. What can you pull out of both x cubed and 2x squared? We can't factor out any number, but they both have x squareds in common. So if I factor out an x squared, then ask yourself, okay, what would go here and what would go here? So x squared times what gives me x cubed? That'd be an x. And x squared times what gives me 2x squared? That'd be a plus 2. So we've already successfully used GCF on our first 2 terms. Nice. Now let's focus on our second. Okay, so we want to see what can I factor out from negative 9x and minus 18. Well, I can take out a 9, and I'll be left with x plus, or x and a 2. Actually, I don't want you to worry about the signs because students get tripped up over the signs all the time. I'm just going to show you a trick right now. When you factor out x plus 2, I don't want you to worry too much about it. The other guy will always be x plus 2. It'll always be the same. Okay, these guys in the parentheses will always be the same. Your job is to try to figure out what number goes here then. So what times x would have given me the minus 9x? And then what times 2 would give me the minus 18? That number should work for both. If not, you made a mistake. So in this case, the number is going to be minus 9. And I'll check by distributing. That's minus 9x, check mark, minus 18, check mark. So again, the kind of nifty little trick that you learn after doing these over and over is that these guys are always going to be the same. And you have to just figure out what's that mystery number in the middle. Okay, so what do we do next step? Once we have already done GCF for 2 sets, now I want you to observe, look at the first, look at the second, what do they have in common? Well, what they have in common is the parentheses guy. So since they have that in common, I can factor it out of both terms. I'm going to actually factor out the common factor. They both have an x plus 2. So once that's gone, ask yourself what's left over. I have an x squared left over, and then I have a minus 9 left over. So the quick thing to do is just rewrite the common guy and then find your leftovers and put them together. So we're almost done. We have successfully factored by grouping, but we're not completely finished because we can actually factor this even further. Look at the second term. Does that look familiar? I can actually use difference of squares here. So I'm going to write the next step, see if you agree. Just rewriting the x plus 2, and x squared minus 9 can be rewritten as x minus 3, x plus 3. Now we are fully factored, and that is our final answer. Okay, last problem of the day. It says select all polynomials equivalent to this guy. Okay, so before we do anything, and before we look at any of these choices here, let's just try factoring this ourselves. So we have 5x cubed plus 40. So the first thing to note is it's definitely going to be using difference of cubes. I've got the cubes, and I've only got 2 terms, so I know it's difference of cubes. But I'm already looking at this 5 and thinking, yeah, I don't know if there's a number cubed that gives me 5. Luckily for us, we remember to always check GCF first. Can we pull out a greatest common factor? So what's the biggest number that goes into 5 and into 40 evenly? That's 5. I'll factor it out. I'm left with x cubed plus 8. Now all that's left to do is to do the sum of cubes for this expression. So as before, we are going to rewrite this as something cubed plus cubed. We'll write our formula underneath. And now we have to just observe. Okay, so what cubed gives me x cubed? That's x. What cubed gives me 8? That's 2. So now my a is equal to x and my b is equal to 2. Oh my gosh, I screwed this one up. That should be a cubed. That should be a cubed. Whew. Okay. So now I'm going to factor this. So let's just use this as our guide. Let's do it. So a plus b, which is 2. Now we're going to square our a term minus. Multiply them together. A times b is going to be 2x plus square your b. So 2 times 2 is 4. Since I have a GCF, I cannot forget about this 5 out in front, so I just need to rewrite my final answer. Is 5x plus 2, x squared minus 2x plus 4. So this would be my super final answer. Let's see if we can find it in our choices. There it is. There's another answer here that also works, and that would be this step. That's when we had factored out the 5. So this is equivalent, because the question says, what are the polynomials equivalent to? And so since we factored out the 5, we know that this is going to be equivalent. Now what's wrong here for the first term? We factored out the 5, but we should have been left with the x cubed. And this one's missing that, so this is incorrect. And what's wrong with this one? It looks like they did difference of cubes. However, they messed up. In that one, they acted like their b While it should have been 2, for them, they got their b value to be 8, which is incorrect. So this is also no. That's how we approach problem number 4. You're going to work it out yourself and then compare. See if at any step of the game, in this case we had 2 different forms, we just found those and then we're done. Okay, it was a pleasure working with you. See you next time.